The icy wind lashed against his face as the U.S. soldier carried out his routine patrol by the river. Suddenly, he noticed something unusual moving in the water. At first, he thought it was just a piece of driftwood being carried away by the current. But then his heart skipped a beat. It was a living creature, desperately struggling against the water. Without a moment's hesitation, he dropped his gear and leapt into the freezing river. Battling the strong current, he reached the drowning figure, and what he saw made him freeze in disbelief. Friends, what do you think about stories like this? Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more incredible stories of heroism and kindness. The river stretched out before him, a winding ribbon of dark, icy water framed by frost-covered banks. The soldier adjusted his scarf against the bitter wind that cut through his uniform, its icy fingers reaching deep into his bones. Each breath formed a cloud of mist that quickly disappeared into the cold morning air. His boots crunched against the frozen ground as he moved steadily along the riverbank, eyes scanning the landscape out of habit. It was a routine patrol, the kind he had done countless times before. The area was quiet, almost eerily so, with only the sound of the wind rustling through the skeletal trees lining the river. Occasionally, a few stray leaves would skitter across the frozen ground, their brittle edges snapping against the frost. The soldier felt the familiar solitude of his duty, a mix of focus and detachment that had become second nature. The river itself was a forbidding presence, its surface dark and restless. Small chunks of ice floated along the current, bobbing and twisting as they were carried downstream. The water was hypnotic in its relentless movement, a stark contrast to the stillness of the surrounding landscape. It was a place of quiet power, cold and indifferent to the human figure walking along its edge. As the soldier continued his patrol, he noted the usual signs of winter's grip: animal tracks frozen in the mud, patches of snow clinging to the shadows, and the faint glint of frost on the barren branches overhead. Everything about the scene was familiar, predictable until it wasn't. His attention was drawn to the water by a movement that broke the monotony of the river's flow. At first, he dismissed it as a piece of debris, a branch, or perhaps a chunk of ice spinning in the current. But as he stopped and focused, his trained eyes picked up something unusual. The movement wasn't random, it was erratic, frantic. Something was struggling. He narrowed his gaze, leaning forward slightly as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. His heart quickened, the familiar rhythm of routine giving way to the sharp edge of urgency. It wasn't debris. It was alive. The soldier took a step closer to the riverbank, his boots sinking slightly into the frozen mud. His pulse pounded in his ears as he strained to see more clearly. For a moment, the object disappeared beneath the surface, and his breath caught in his throat. Then it reappeared, a small shape thrashing weakly against the current. Adrenaline surged through him. Whatever it was, it didn't have long. The cold water and the relentless current were merciless. Without a second thought, he shrugged off his gear, his movements quick and practiced, and prepared to do what needed to be done. The soldier's heart pounded as he stood on the riverbank, the frantic splashes growing weaker with each passing second. There was no time to deliberate. With practiced efficiency, he shrugged off his heavy gear, letting it fall onto the frozen ground with a dull thud. The icy wind bit at his exposed skin, but he barely noticed. His mind was already in motion, focused entirely on the task ahead. In one swift motion, he launched himself into the river. The cold hit him like a wall, the icy water wrapping around his body and stealing the breath from his lungs. For a moment, it felt as though the freezing depths were trying to pull him under, the shock of the temperature almost paralyzing. But the soldier forced himself to move, his arms cutting through the water with deliberate strength. The current was more powerful than it had seemed from the shore. It tugged at him with relentless force, threatening to sweep him downstream. Every stroke was a battle, the cold seeping into his muscles and making them ache with effort. Yet he pressed on, his focus locked on the small, struggling figure ahead. The creature had disappeared beneath the surface again, and his chest tightened at the thought of being too late. Adrenaline coursed through him, pushing his body beyond its limits. Each kick and pull of his arms felt like a lifetime, but the distance between him and the shape in the water began to close. He could see it now, a small, furred form bobbing weakly just above the surface. It was limp, its movements slowing, as if the cold had finally claimed its fight. Not yet, the soldier muttered through clenched teeth, his voice swallowed by the wind and rushing water. He reached out with one hand, the other keeping him afloat against the current. His fingers brushed against wet fur, soft and delicate, yet heavy with water. Summoning the last of his strength, he wrapped his hand around the creature, pulling it close to his chest. The soldier turned, kicking hard against the current as he began the arduous journey back to shore. The weight of the creature in his arms felt heavier than it should have, a reminder of how close it had come to succumbing to the icy grip of the river. He kept his movements steady, his focus unyielding. The water fought him at every step, its freezing temperature gnawing at his resolve, but he didn't falter. Finally, his feet found the riverbed, and he stumbled toward the bank. The cold had slowed his movements, but his grip on the creature never loosened. As he reached the shore, he collapsed onto the frozen ground, the water streaming off his clothes in icy rivulets. His chest heaved as he fought to catch his breath, the sharp cold air filling his lungs. The soldier pushed through the icy current, his muscles burning with the effort. Each stroke brought him closer to the struggling figure, though the cold gnawed relentlessly at his strength. Finally, his fingers brushed against wet fur, soft, fragile, and trembling under his touch. He grasped it gently but firmly, pulling it toward him, his heart pounding as the small shape began to take form. It was a puppy, a tiny golden retriever, soaked to the skin and barely holding its head above the water. Its golden fur, darkened by the river's icy grip, clung tightly to its frail frame. The puppy's eyes, wide with fear and desperation, locked onto the soldiers as if begging for salvation. Its small paws paddled weakly against the current, a final, instinctive attempt to stay afloat. The soldier's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, the rushing of the river and the biting cold fading into the background. All he could see was the trembling creature in his arms, its life hanging by a thread. The sheer vulnerability of the puppy, its tiny body shivering uncontrollably in the freezing water, struck him with a force he hadn't expected. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, his voice low and steady despite the chaos around them. The puppy whimpered softly, its tiny chest heaving with the effort to breathe. It was light, almost weightless in his arms, but the soldier could feel the fragile pulse of life within it, faint but present. That small flicker of vitality fueled his resolve. Holding the puppy close to his chest to shield it from the cold, he turned toward the shore. The river's current fought him with every step, but his grip on the trembling creature never wavered. He moved deliberately, each step a calculated push against the icy pull of the water. The puppy, too weak to struggle anymore, rested its head against his soaked uniform, its eyes fluttering closed as if surrendering to trust. As he neared the riverbank, the soldier felt the ground firm beneath his feet. Relief surged through him, but he didn't allow himself to pause. The urgency of the situation kept him moving. Every second counted, and he couldn't afford to let the cold take what little life remained in the puppy's fragile body. Reaching the shore, he collapsed onto the frozen ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The puppy lay cradled in his arms, shivering violently but alive. The soldier quickly shrugged off his jacket, wrapping it around the small creature to provide what little warmth he could. The puppy whimpered again, a weak sound that pierced his heart. "Hang on, little one," he said, his voice resolute despite the chill biting at his own body. He gently rubbed the puppy's fur, trying to coax warmth back into its tiny form. As the minutes passed, the tremors in the puppy's body began to subside slightly, though its eyes remained half-closed, its exhaustion evident. The soldier couldn't tear his gaze away from the tiny life in his arms. The thought of how it had ended up in the river, alone and helpless, made his jaw tighten. Someone had thrown this puppy away, casting it into the icy depths without a second thought. The cruelty of it was almost incomprehensible. But the soldier knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't let this little creature's story end in the cold waters of the river. As the puppy let out a faint sigh and nuzzled weakly into the warmth of the jacket, the soldier's resolve hardened. This was more than a rescue, it was a chance to prove that kindness and compassion could triumph over even the darkest acts. With the puppy secure in his arms, he rose to his feet, ready to bring it to safety and ensure that this tiny life would never have to face such despair again. The soldier dropped to his knees on the frozen ground, his chest heaving as he tried to steady his breath. The icy air burned his lungs, and his soaked clothes clung to his skin, sapping what little warmth he had left. But none of it mattered. All his attention was on the tiny, trembling form cradled in his arms. The puppy was still alive, though barely. Its fur, darkened by the icy water, clung tightly to its fragile frame. Each shallow breath it took seemed like a victory against the odds. The soldier gently unwrapped his scarf and cocooned the puppy in it, shielding the small creature from the biting wind. Its tiny body shivered violently, a mixture of cold and fear radiating through its weak movements. "You're okay," the soldier murmured softly, his voice hoarse but steady. He gently brushed his gloved hand over the puppy's head, trying to offer comfort. The puppy's eyes fluttered open briefly, filled with a mixture of exhaustion and terror, before closing again as it nestled into the warmth of the scarf. But as he examined the puppy more closely, something in the pit of his stomach twisted. This wasn't an accident. The realization hit him like a blow, each detail confirming the horrifying truth. The puppy's fur was too clean to suggest it had been wandering in the wild for long. There were no signs of injury consistent with slipping into the river or falling. Instead, the small creature's presence in the water seemed deliberate, too deliberate. Someone had thrown it in. The thought sent a surge of anger and disbelief through him. Who could do such a thing? The puppy's size, its innocent gaze, it was clear that it was just a few weeks old, completely defenseless. It didn't stand a chance in the icy water, left to battle the current and the cold with no hope of survival. Someone had taken this vulnerable life and condemned it to what they thought would be a cold, silent end. The soldier clenched his jaw, his grip on the scarf tightening slightly as the weight of the moment settled over him. The puppy let out a faint whimper, pulling his attention back to the present. The little creature nuzzled deeper into the warmth, unaware of the depth of cruelty it had escaped. For the soldier, the mix of relief and fury was overwhelming. Relief that he had been there to intervene, and fury at the nameless person who had caused this suffering. "You didn't deserve this," he said quietly, his voice filled with a raw edge of emotion. He stroked the puppy's head gently, his touch a silent promise that it would never be left to face such cruelty again. The puppy stirred slightly, its small body relaxing just enough to suggest that it sensed it was finally safe. The soldier glanced back at the river, its dark waters rushing by as if nothing had happened. The thought of how close the puppy had come to being swallowed by its icy depths made his chest tighten. But as he looked down at the small bundle in his arms, he felt a surge of determination. This life had been spared, and he would ensure it was protected from harm moving forward. With trembling hands, the soldier stood, his legs unsteady but his resolve firm. He looked at the puppy, now nestled quietly against him, and felt a deep, unshakable sense of responsibility. Whoever had cast it aside had underestimated the strength of kindness and the power of a chance encounter. For this puppy, life wasn't ending, it was just beginning. And he was going to make sure of it. The story of the soldier and the puppy quickly spread, touching the hearts of everyone who heard it. It wasn't just a tale of a brave rescue, it was a story that spoke to the resilience of life and the enduring power of compassion. The image of a soldier cradling a tiny golden retriever, soaked in trembling but alive, became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the harshest circumstances, acts of kindness can shine through. The puppy, once abandoned and left to die, found a second chance at life. In the soldier's care, it began to recover, its fragile body gaining strength with each passing day. The once matted fur regained its golden sheen, and the fear in its eyes was replaced by trust. Every wag of its tail, every playful bark, was a testament to its survival and the soldier's unwavering determination to save it. The soldier, too, was changed by the experience. For him, the act of diving into the icy river wasn't about heroics, it was about doing what was right. But as he watched the puppy thrive, he realized the depth of the connection they shared. The bond between them was unspoken yet profound, a relationship built on trust, courage, and second chances. When asked why he chose to keep the puppy, the soldier's answer was simple: because it needed someone to care. And care he did. The puppy became a cherished part of his life, a source of joy and a constant reminder of the importance of compassion. The soldier named it River, a nod to the place where their paths had crossed and the journey they had shared. The story of River and the soldier inspired countless others. It was shared across social media, featured in news outlets, and discussed in classrooms and communities. People were moved not just by the soldier's bravery but by the lesson it taught that even the smallest act of kindness can ripple outward, changing lives in ways we can't predict. Shelters reported an increase in adoptions as people, inspired by the story, opened their homes to animals in need. Others donated to organizations that worked to protect vulnerable creatures, determined to make a difference in their own way. The story had become more than a rescue, it was a call to action, a reminder that compassion can be a powerful force for good. For the soldier and River, life continued, filled with moments of warmth and love that neither had known they needed. Whether it was a quiet evening by the fire or a romp through the fields, every moment was a celebration of the bond they had formed. Their story was a living testament to the fact that kindness can overcome cruelty, and that even in the face of darkness, hope can prevail. How did this incredible story make you feel? Let us know in the comments, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories of courage, kindness, and the unbreakable bonds that remind us of the goodness in the world. Together, let's celebrate the acts of compassion that truly make a difference.